During the last 4 months, the United States stock market has been breaking record after record, as if nothing could stop it. But a single tweet from Donald Trump was enough to erase more than $1.5 trillion from the S&P 500 index, merely by threatening to double tariffs against China. A day later, Trump himself wrote that everything was fine, and the market recovered as if nothing had happened. At first glance, it seems like a temporary fluctuation, but beneath that, there is something much more serious, something that most people have not yet perceived. If we step back a little and stop measuring everything only in dollars, the picture changes completely. Despite the US market being at record highs when measured in dollars, in terms of gold it is falling, reaching its lowest point in more than 10 years. This difference began to become evident at the beginning of 2024 and accelerated with the first tariff announcements in early 2025. Historically, every time the market falls in relation to gold, it eventually stagnates in dollars as well. It was like that in the 1970s during the .com crisis, and again in 2008 during the global financial collapse. What this shows is a pattern. When gold begins to rise while stocks still appear strong, the system is trying to warn that something is wrong. It is money running toward a safer place. Only this time, something curious is happening. Gold is rising, but so are stocks. It is as if the market had decided to completely ignore all warning signs. Tariffs have increased, consumption has slowed down, and yet optimism remains forced, sustained by stimuli and illusions. Trump threatened to double tariffs against China, and although he later backed down, the symbolic damage was already done. A 100% tariff would practically make trade between the two largest powers on the planet unfeasible, and that would be enough to push the world toward a depression. However, China is more prepared than before. Its exports to the United States have fallen by almost 30% since the beginning of the trade war. But the country compensated by expanding its relations with the rest of the world. In other words, they are becoming less and less dependent on the West. And that is where the danger lies. The more the interests of China and the United States drift apart, the greater the risk that one day someone, Trump or another president, will decide to break that relationship completely. And the mere fact that this is on the horizon already shows how fragile the global system is. The market has not yet reacted because corporate profits remain at record levels, sustained by trillion-dollar deficits and interest rate cuts. But all of this is a house of cards, and when the wind changes, not a single stone will be left standing. What keeps the market standing right now is not real strength, but economic morphine. The US government is spending more than $2 trillion per year beyond what it collects, something close to 7% of its entire GDP. And that borrowed money maintains the artificial sensation of growth. The Federal Reserve cuts interest rates, makes credit cheaper, and pushes companies to take on more debt. Thus, the system appears healthy. But what really exists is a body addicted to stimulus, incapable of living without constant injections of liquidity. These policies help large corporations earn profits like never before. Loan costs fall, profit margins skyrocket, and shareholders see their wealth inflate at a surreal pace. But this bonanza is not sustainable because it is being fueled by the state's own indebtedness, and by a weakened consumption that depends more and more on easy credit. It is a confidence bubble disguised as progress. And like every bubble, one day it bursts. Meanwhile, gold and Bitcoin continue to rise side by side. They do not depend on the performance of the economy, but reflect people's fear that all of this might collapse. And what is curious is that even so, the stock market keeps rising. It is as if two realities coexist. One visible, full of optimism and record profits, and another underground, silent, where smart money is already seeking refuge before the castle roars. History shows that this contradiction always announces something bigger. Before the 2008 crisis, the market also seemed unshakable. Before the dot-com crash, the optimism was the same. The cycle repeats itself because human nature does not change. We want to believe that this time it's different, but it never is. Excess confidence is always the prelude to the fall. That is why investors who understand the game do not run. They prepare. When they perceive that the risk of a correction is high, they step back, protect what they have achieved, and wait for the storm to pass. That is how they survive the crises that destroy entire financial empires. The market does not collapse from one day to the next. It cracks slowly until, suddenly, everything gives way. And when that moment comes, those who are alert will recognize the sound of collapse before the rest of the world perceives it. When confidence begins to crumble, the system reacts with propaganda. Headlines speak of technical adjustments. Experts assure that the economy is solid, and politicians promise that no one will be left behind. It is always the same script. Calm the public while the big players reposition their pieces. Because in the end, the market is not driven by logic. It is driven by fear and greed. And whoever understands that learns to see the theater behind the curtain. Fear is the system's most powerful weapon. It is used to manipulate decisions and keep people inside the game. When the media warns of volatility, the small investor runs to sell at the worst possible moment. When authorities guarantee stability, he buys at the top, believing he is safe. And so the cycle repeats itself. The majority lose, while a silent and cold minority profit from collective panic. What is curious is that in this game, the government and central banks play together. They print money to inflate assets and fake growth, even knowing that every new injection weakens the real value of the currency. It is like pushing a rock uphill with the illusion that it will never roll back down, but it always does. And when that happens, the impact is devastating. This manipulation creates a false sense of wealth. People see the value of their stocks rising, the price of real estate skyrocketing, and they believe they are becoming richer. But it is only an illusion. Purchasing power falls, inflation silently corrodes, and money loses what is most important to it: trust. Deep down, what is being sold is not prosperity. It is hope. And too much hope in a sick system is the anesthetic that precedes bankruptcy. The breaking point comes when that hope is no longer enough. When the average citizen realizes that food, energy, and even personal security cost more than they can afford, confidence in the system evaporates. And when confidence disappears, no chart, central bank, or political promise can stop the collapse. It is then that digital money, gold, and self-sufficiency return to being what they have always been: not a luxury, but an instinct for survival. while the public celebrates artificial records and promises of growth, a subterranean movement is taking place, discreet, almost invisible, but immensely powerful. They are people who have stopped believing in the system and have begun to build a parallel world. They do not announce their decisions on social networks, nor do they try to convince anyone. They simply observe, calculate, and move. They are the ones who understood that the global economy has become a game of appearances, and that the only way to win is not to play by the imposed rules. These individuals do not chase quick profits or status. They seek autonomy. They are buying small plots of land, learning to generate their own energy, studying regenerative agriculture, decentralized technology, and above all, developing emotional resilience. Because they know that the true collapse will not only be economic, but psychological. When people realize that the money in the bank is just a number without value, the first currency to disappear will be trust. And when trust goes, everything else collapses with it. The flight from the system is not an act of rebellion, but of a lucidity. It is the awakening of those who understood that security and dependence never coexist. That is why so many are migrating to alternatives such as Bitcoin, not as a fad, but as a philosophy. They understand that decentralization is not just a technology. It is a way of life, a silent refusal of control. Having your own store of value is, above all, a declaration of independence. And that is something governments and central banks will never be able to offer, because their profits depend precisely on our fear of loss. While the common citizen numbs himself with digital distractions and political promises, the invisible one, the one who watches the chaos from the outside, prepares himself. He studies history and recognizes the cycle. First comes euphoria, then debt, and finally the fall. When collapse approaches, the market always tries to throw one last party to disguise the panic. But those who are awake know that the end of an era never comes with explosions. It comes with silence. An economic, political, and spiritual silence, where truth once again becomes simple. Those who plant, eat. Those who create, survive. Those who depend, fall. The new wealth will not be measured in numbers, but in autonomy. Gold, land, energy, and knowledge return to being what they have always been, pillars of freedom. And paradoxically, while governments speak of digital inclusion and currencies controlled by algorithms, true power becomes analog, physical, tangible, real. There is no algorithm that can simulate the smell of wet earth, the sound of a house built with one's own hands, or the value of a community that helps itself without the need for banks. The system believes it is winning because it controls the majority, but it forgets a historical detail. Every structure of domination collapses when the individual stops believing in it. And that is exactly what is beginning to happen. The escape from the system is not a revolt. It is a return to lucidity, to simplicity, and to personal sovereignty. It is the reminder that true freedom is not conquered. It is reconquered every time the world tries to convince us that we need to be saved. When the structure finally gives way, it will not be with the roar many imagine, but with a sigh. The indexes will fall without warning, credit will disappear, and people will suddenly realize that nothing they possessed really belonged to them. The collapse will not come as an external enemy, but as a mirror, It will mercilessly reveal how dependent humanity has become on a system it built itself. It will not only be a financial crisis, but a crisis of identity. Modern man, disconnected from nature and from his own essence, will discover that he traded his freedom for convenience. At first, panic will take over. Banks closing, governments promising stability they cannot deliver, and the media repeating the same mantra. Stay calm. It's temporary. But nothing will be temporary, because what is collapsing is not a phase. It is an entire model of civilization, one sustained by debt, lies, and illusions. At that moment, true value will resurface. Food, energy, community, and practical knowledge will be worth more than any stock or digital currency. And it will be in that chaos that the lucid man will stand out. He will not fight against the collapse. He will observe it with serenity. He will understand that he is witnessing the end of one era and the birth of another, because every destruction carries with it an invitation to rebuild, this time with consciousness. The fall of the system will also be the fall of the collective ego, and whoever manages to cross this passage without getting lost in fear will come out the other side different, simpler, freer, more human. That new man will not measure his wealth in numbers, but in autonomy. His strength will not come from control, but from presence. He will understand that to be rich is to have time, health, clarity, and a peaceful mind, and that the true investment is the one that multiplies these things. Perhaps the future will not be about accumulating, but about sustaining. A balance between what one has and what one is. When the system collapses, the only currency left will be consciousness, and few will have it. The global collapse is not the end. It is a return to reality, to the earth, to effort, to the value of silence and simplicity. Humanity has gone too far in the illusion of control, and will now be forced to relearn how to live. Many will see this as a tragedy, others as an opportunity, because deep down, collapse is merely the necessary cleansing for something new to be born. The question is, when that new world begins to emerge, will you be ready to be part of it? Or will you still be trying to save the old one? When everything collapses, the world goes silent, and in that silence, something sacred happens. The human being, for the first time in a long while, is forced to look inward. Without the noise of the market, without the distractions of technology, without the false security of numbers climbing on bright screens, only the naked truth remains. The truth he avoided for decades. He realizes that it was not the system that sustained him, but the illusion that he was safe. And collapse, in that sense, is not punishment. It is purification. The end of the financial illusion is also the end of an era of collective childishness. For years, we believed that someone would come to save us. A government, a company, a new currency, a miraculous technology. He realizes that it was not the system that sustained him, but the illusion that he was safe. And collapse in that sense is not punishment. It is purification. The end of the financial illusion is also the end of an era of collective childishness. For years, we believed that someone would come to save us. A government, a company, a new currency, a miraculous technology. Now, with the ground disappearing beneath our feet, humanity will be forced to grow up. True maturity is not knowing how to invest, but knowing how to endure. It is discovering that freedom and responsibility are inseparable, and that no system can protect those who refuse to think for themselves. In the post-collapse era, the hierarchy changes. The wise will once again be worth more than the rich. Those who know how to heal, plant, build, and teach will become indispensable. Society will slowly return to the value of the real. Gold and Bitcoin will continue to exist, but they will be only symbols, reflections of something deeper. The human desire not to depend, to be sovereign, to regain control over one's own life. The future will belong to those who understand that the only true store of value is awakened consciousness. If you like this content and want more analyses like this one, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and share it with those who seek to understand what is really happening in the world.